Matt here from Matt's Movies, Music and More, and my special guest Andrew, welcoming you to this week's episode of What Did You Think? So if you saw our last episode on What Did You Think, you will know that the movie that we reviewed last time was from the action category, which was the 1986 John Carpenter classic Big Trouble in Little China.
That was a lot of fun to do. Please do check that out.
And to replace that movie on the Twister Spinner for its next spin is the 1988 buddy movie Midnight Run, which stars Charles Grodin and Robert De Niro as Jack Walsh.
Looking forward to that, covering that finally, yeah.
And for today's movie, today's comes from horror. To replace this movie, I've put, instead of the 70s movie that we're doing today, we are going to be doing the 1993 horror thriller Brain Scan, which stars Edward Furlong and Frank Langella. Do you remember that one?
No.
No?
No, but it sounds like a very 90s thing, so that sounds fair.
Okay, so on with today's episode. So today's episode, it comes from horror. We are doing the 1973 British horror movie PSYCHOMANIA, which is directed by Don Sharp, and it stars Nicky Henson, Beryl Reid, Mary Larkin, and George Sanders in his final role.
Yeah, what I've read about that, yeah.
Yes. So, PSYCHOMANIA. Had you seen it before it come up on the Twister Spinner?
Never heard of it, I have to say.
Okay.
My only impression going into this is thinking, yeah, that sounds like a very 70s title, like it should be on a gatefold cover album, heavy metal album or something.
I think it has been used on albums by death metal bands and stuff like that. They've used a name like that for band.
I can believe that, yes.
Well, in America, this movie is actually called The Death Wheelers, but in the UK it's PSYCHOMANIA.
So this is a more exploitative roadside cinema title, I have to say.
Yeah, but on to the movie and its plot then. So, can you describe as best as you can PSYCHOMANIA?
As best as I can. I mean, Nicky Henson is Tom Latham, who is the leader of a group of bikers who call themselves the Living Dead, which is a bit of foreshadowing. But for a group of bikers, that all of them, especially Tom, have very home counties accents, and for a group of deaf biker violent hooligan gang, all talk in this sort of pronounced way. And oh yes, Jane, aren't we having a lot of fun running down all these pedestrians? Aren't we having such larks? Oh, we're having a terrific time, aren't we? But we then find out that he still lives with his mother, Beryl Reid, and their faithful butler Shadwell, who's George Saunders. So this probably makes a bit of sense that they've got all these very otherwise very disjointed or distracted way of speaking to each other. We're violent bikers, aren't we? But what Tom and his mother and Shadwell are all into are seances that deal with talking to the dead in a very suspicious, I don't satanic or certainly very dark way, because when one of their clients tries to give them a crucifix as a gift, Shadwell's like, ugh, get that thing away from me. So, all right. Tom has always seemingly had a fascination with death. But particularly perhaps coming back from the dead, or what happened to my father, mother? He's put his body in this room, in this locked room, and I've never seen him since. And so he gets the chance to go in and discovers through this and some frog that he picked up in a graveyard. That Shadwell and his mother were like, oh, well done, you found that particular type of frog. For a frog-induced vision, I don't mean licking it, although I wouldn't have been surprised. The frog gives him a vision that the father's body is not there, but finds out that his father is... Beryl Reid and they did a deal when he was a baby that the father crossed into the ether through these magic stones, this magic stone circle that the living dead gather at, I think, but made a deal, but the father went into the darkness and never came back. And overhearing a conversation after he's passed out about he didn't believe he would come back. That's the thing. You have to believe you come back when you die. And thank you, Mother. That's what I wanted to know. So next day, to his biker friend says, I'm going to commit suicide, but I'm going to come back. So driving over the bridge, goodbye, Jane, or whatever his girlfriend's name is, Abby. And bye. Initially, it's like, oh no, Tom is dead. Oh, it's such a tragedy. We're going to bury him by the stone circle, upright on his bloody bike, underneath the soil, the topsoil. And I thought, well, congratulations, that will take a day's worth of rain for that topsoil to be removed, and any passing tourist will see this corpse. But this tourist does go through, as a good old horror tradition, oh no, I have to take a shortcut through the magic stone circle, and from the dirt, from the soil, vroom, Tom is alive. Tom comes back, and after some initial confusion about some person pretending to be Tom is right around on his bike killing people. Oh, that does lead to a good line of dialogue on the phone about Beryl Reid hears and oh, he did it. He did what the father couldn't. He's come back. How are you? I'm fine, Mother. I'm dead, but I'm fine otherwise. So he's not a zombie. He's not. He's perfectly normal Tom. It's just he's indestructible and can't be killed. So eventually he introduces himself back to the gang. I'm alive, everybody. It is really me. It is really Tom. Let's all commit suicide. Then we can do anything we want and no one can stop us. That's the setup.
Yeah, because obviously with that, I will say just briefly at that bit there, they can't kill each other. It can only be done by killing yourself.
Yeah, you have to commit suicide. And if you believe really hard that you'll come back, then you will come back from the dead. Apparently it's that easy.
So Psychomania, we can't really spoil the plot any more than this, but
rather not.
No, but I am curious to say about the way that they speak in this movie, because it is so English in the 1960s and 70s when people only ever talk in that kind of accent. Even the common people, like with the girl who's called Jane, she's like, come on, what are we waiting for? She kind of talks like that.
Everyone.
Yes, but she does talk in a very posh kind of voice still. So they're still sort of middle class, I'd say.
Was A Clockwork Orange released around this time?
I believe 2 years prior, 71.
Yeah. It's kind of similar and yet kind of different all at the same time when thinking about the comparison to this.
Well, I look at this movie and I think this is a unique horror film from England, but also a unique horror film in itself, because it's kind of the first movie to mix bikers. So Easy Rider and The Wild Angels and all these late 60s bikers movies come out, and someone's thought of the clever idea to mix the motorcycles in with horror and sort of zombies. But as you said, these characters don't look like zombies. They just look like their normal selves, except
they still talk normally.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some of the memorable scenes in this film that really stands out, because I mean, like, obviously one scene which does stand out is Tom's funeral, which is they've got him buried in this kind of like holy, it's like their holy hangout, kind of like a Stonehenge kind of meet.
Yeah, I was trying to say magic stone circle.
Yeah, and you've got a character who's called Chopped Meat, who we'll talk about a little bit later. He's playing and singing his guitar, this song Riding Free, and
which I'm sure topped the charts that year.
It's a really good song actually, but it's just like you're thinking to yourself, why would you do that? You're supposed to be just having a funeral, and also why wasn't his mother there? It seemed like his mother and Shadwell never left the house, although Shadwell does leave the house every now and then.
Yeah, so I've brought something for Tom.
Yeah,
and then drives off in his car again.
Yeah, and then obviously you've got like some memorable scenes such as Anarchy in the shopping centre, which we'll talk about a bit later.
Yeah.
And you've also got this scene where, as you said earlier, which was when Tom comes back to life, and one of the first things he does is he goes and fills up his bike with petrol, and he's getting filled up, whatever. He's like, right, that would be so and so, please, Sonny. And then he's like, bit of a problem there. He hasn't got any money. He's like, look, don't play that trick on me. And then obviously his first victim's done there and then. And then what does he do? He proceeds to go to the local pub. Where you see a who's who of people from television and stuff. And that's why I want to mention that with this movie, I'll mention all the little bit players first, actually, which is, in this film, you've got many classic British television actors, such as Bill Pertwee, famous for the Dad's Army TV series. He plays the landlord in the pub. And did you notice him?
I was too busy focusing on the scene itself, and that's also the scene where that whole, he gets on the phone at that point, thanks to a pretty girl that he likes. He gets the money for, not that he likes, that she takes a shine to him. So, if I give him money, then he will go out with me.
Yeah, let me go on his bike.
Yeah, that was it. So that's where he got the money to do the phone call. Hello, mother, I'm dead, but I'm still here. I can't remember the exact words. So I was focused more on that than noticing who that landlord was.
So we noticed him. There's also June Brown, who plays Dot Cotton in EastEnders. She's in it as Jane's mother at the funeral. Don't know if you noticed her. And you said there was two people you recognised.
Yeah, before we started recording, there is a scene when some of the gang are captured. So Tom and his friend go right. We're gonna burst into the police station and rescue them, because we can just do that, and we'll do it on our bikes and cause a fuss. So yeah, eat your heart out, Arnold Schwarzenegger. These two were doing it about a decade before you were. And the police constables at the station, like every authority figure in this movie, they're like, "Here, Sonny, we've had enough of your mischief, and here, my good fellow, we don't want you coming round here and causing a fuss." So it's that kind of dialogue I was cringing at. But the two police constables that are there going like, "Oi, sunshine, don't you be doing that," were I noticed them instantly as a... They're John Levine and Alan Benyon are the police constables at the station. As a Doctor Who fan, I instantly recognised that's Sergeant Benton from Unit and the Chief Ice Warrior in the same scene. Pity they get killed about a minute later, but that was one of the few bits of joy and pleasure I got watching this movie.
And then obviously there's one actor who is probably one of the most famous actors in this movie, besides George Sanders, of course, is Robert Hardy, who I didn't really know much about his work, but Robert Hardy plays the Chief Inspector who's trying to solve the mystery of the murders.
Bring them in, book them in, it's a murder charge now.
Yeah, because I mean, he obviously went on to do bigger and better things over the years, but what do you think of the casting in this movie?
Well, it's English and it's early 70s. It's more sort of curiosity value of seeing really these people. You're doing this of all things. Beryl Reid, I want to say it's the strangest thing I've seen her in, but then again, as a Doctor Who fan, I've seen her in Earthshock trying to play a Sigourney Weaver type space commander, so never mind about she was all right. Nicky Henson is charismatic enough in the role. I don't know if I should say at this early stage, I have heard that in interviews he has referred to this movie as a piece of shit that he's embarrassed about being in, and has relented slightly since then, but hearing that made me sympathise with him even more.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there, because we'll mention all these actors anyways that are the main ones. Nicky Henson, I mean, I think as Tom, I think he's great. Yeah. I think he is really the focal character in this movie, because even the gang of bikers that he's with, the other bikers aren't really, there's no real characters there. There's only characters on a few, like with Tom, with Abby, his girlfriend, with Jane, and with Hatchet, who's the ginger-haired, looks a bit like Rupert Grint from bloody Harry Potter, and Chopped Meat, who's the guy who plays guitars. The other biker gang members, they don't really have any lines, they don't really do much. But no, Nicky Henson's very good. I mean, looking up a lot of these actors' filmographies and stuff, because a lot of them I didn't know necessarily, but Nicky Henson in 1968 was in a movie that I hope to cover on What Did You Think at some point, which is Witchfinder General. He's actually in that. Okay, and obviously another thing that I know him from is that he was a guest star in an episode of 40 Towers. In subsequent years, he's been in things like Syriana with George Clooney, and he's also in We Still Steal or We Still Kill the Old Way, which is a movie with Ian Ogilvy. It's kind of a modern British gangster movie. But no, Nicky Henson, I did see those interviews where he said that this movie was a piece of shit, and he seems to have a laugh of it. He seems to think, oh, I only did it for the money, which obviously being a budding actor, that's all you do a movie for. But he said this movie was made so cheaply that they filmed it relatively quickly. Going on to Abbey.
Also, I'll squeeze in perhaps one last Doctor Who reference. Nicky Henson was in an audio drama, Loup-Garou. It's pronounced French, but it's basically about werewolves in Brazil, and he's the chief baddie. He's the big bad wolf of fairy tale legend.
Wow.
Right.
And you got Mary Larkin, who plays Abby. I'll be honest, I don't really know much about her career, but I have seen her interviewed about the movie, and she has fond memories of it as far as I'm aware. Beryl Reid, don't really know much about Beryl Reid's career, apart from that she got into acting relatively late. I think it was in sort of the early 1960s onwards where she became a presence on television and film and stuff. Hence why I was quite surprised when you said about Doctor Who.
Yeah, it was, I won't go into detail, but it was during the 80s when the producer was keen to cast all kinds of celebrities, showbiz people, regardless of whether they were appropriate for the role or not. But yeah, it's a surprise. It's a surprise to you. You try watching it.
And finally, obviously, the one actor that we are going to mention, who at the time was the most famous actor, is George Sanders, who was a British actor who had hit it big in Hollywood and had starred in loads of things. He even starred in The Falcon, which was like a Sherlock Holmes type of detective show that was made into a bunch of films and stuff. But again, I don't really know much about George Sanders' career, apart from the fact that I know that Psychomania was his last movie. I know he was in Village of the Damned, which came out in the 60s. Other than that, I don't really know much about his movie career.
No. Well, I can't help you at the top of my head.
But the interesting thing about we say that this is George Sanders' last movie is apparently there is a rumour that has been going around for a number of years because George Sanders killed himself, an overdose, shortly after completing this movie. And I think he said something about he was embarrassed with this movie and that he was like, I've grown tired of life, let's end it. So that's looking up about him, you know.
Well, I know that we'll probably go into our opinions shortly. There are questionable things about this movie, but it's not worth taking your life over.
To be honest, I think the highlight characters in this movie are Tom and Shadwell.
Yeah.
I think George Sanders really is underrated in this movie.
It's a limited role, but he brings so much to it.
Yeah, and it's a shame that that's what he'll be remembered for. Is he thought this movie was an embarrassment and sort of took the coward's way out, I guess, you know.
Well,
but obviously, if he watched the movie, he obviously didn't believe strong enough to come back. Given this is a movie about suicide,
I would reprimand you for a joke like that, but it's hopefully enough time has passed where we won't get into trouble for that sort of thing. Moving on.
Yes. So I will mention as well, because we haven't mentioned it yet, is the director, which is Don Sharp. Now, again, I don't really know much about Don Sharp's filmography, apart from the fact that he had directed a few movies for Hammer in the 60s. I believe he directed things like The Reptile, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones he'd done, but it's mostly more of the lesser known Hammer movies. And being a big Hammer horror fan, this is what's interesting about Psychomania, is that Psychomania is not produced by Hammer or Amicus or Tigan or anything like that. It's just a regularly produced British movie, and I think that's why it stands out. A lot of people probably in America probably would expect this to be within the Hammer canon, I'd say. Would you say?
Well, I don't know if I'd want to besmirch the good name of Hammer with a movie like this, but I could begin to, in concept at least, begin to see where you're coming from, but I'm not entirely sure, with perhaps the notable exception of the final visual effect they do, without spoiling it. The visual effect they do, that was going towards something, going towards the creepiness and the horror. But apart from that, I wouldn't say it's in the same class.
I will mention one thing that does stand out in this film, which is the stunt work with the bikes, the actual motorcycle scenes, and the suicides of some of the characters. Very well done. Some of them are a bit bizarre. Like one guy who kills himself in the movie, which I was laughing when I saw it. Is a guy is stripped down to his underwear and he's got a ball and chain around his feet, so he's going to die of drowning and hypothermia at the same time, right?
Yeah, it is that scene of I'm going to commit suicide this way, and I'm going. Then another person commits suicide this way.
And one of them just sort of does like a Benny Hill salute, the Rupert Grint looking type character, and just stands on the bridge, falls down, only to get run over by a truck, and yet he's still smiling. His corpse is still smiling. Wouldn't you think he would have broken legs or something doing a death like that?
I don't think he would have cared at that point.
Fair enough. But what did you think of Psychomania?
My first instinct is to say I thought it was crap.
Really?
But to be trying to be a little bit fairer to it, I was bringing up things like Clockwork Orange, and maybe it's just seeing more recent American horror movies, which is a tad unfair, but it does bring into sharp relief how dated and how twee and how cheap this movie looks in comparison. Even if you take the central conceit of a biker gang that can't die into consideration, and even though we've got the background and the justification for it, there's no getting past the home counties accents of everybody. Oh, we're going to have so much fun killing people, aren't we? Oh, do kill yourself, Abby, we will be together. And the authority figures go, we've had enough of your mischief, sunshine, and here we're going to book you in, and these horrible lot. And I know it's the late 60s and early 70s, but it just makes it laughable. But just about laughable in a good way. And like I said, apart from the ending, which I won't spoil, it's remarkably light on any gore or blood.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got people killing themselves, which is nasty enough, but you've got the whole campness of the police officers. We're going to stop them, and they obviously don't. I mean, like you say, the butler is George Sanders plays him very well, and I began to feel a little bit of something for the girlfriend who goes for a bit of an arc or a crisis of confidence in the third act. Okay, you're going for something here, but it's difficult to care at this point when everything looks so cheap and just subpar.
Well, you have to expect that this was in the early 70s. This movie probably cost, I don't know, maybe £100,000 or less, I'm guessing, back then. This was probably produced really cheap to be one of these B movies, you know. But,
I'd say to try and be fair and to not trash on this too hard. There's a series that maybe some of you out there might be aware of, American series Mystery Science Theater 3000, that's all about watching terrible crummy B movies and laughing at them and making jokes throughout them. I'd say this is perfect material for that sort of thing, or a Friday night, get drunk with your friends and have a good laugh and make jokes as you watch this silly plot of frog magic and bikers.
I'm so glad you say that, because that's where I want to weigh in my opinion of Psychomania, which is I discovered Psychomania as a mid-teenager when I discovered it on something that doesn't happen anymore in the UK, which was the Friday night horror double bill, which would be shown either by BBC or Channel 4.
Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah, and that's what got me into Hammer movies and the horror in general. And I think Psychomania was shown one night very late on BBC, sometime after midnight, and I think it was something that either my parents might have taped or something, and I'd have watched it the next day, even though sometimes I would stay up a bit late. But I think I remember watching that the next day, and I noticed something with the movie, which is, this is why I want to say this now, because I've got a special treat in store, Andrew, which might interest you.
Oh, goody.
Yeah, I got a special treat because we're now going to go somewhere.
Wait, what? Where are we?
Oh,
more to the point, how did you do that?
Clever thing, isn't it? These videos, I got the tricks. I might not have the budget, but I've got the tricks to do it.
If you say so.
Yeah. Your answer to your question, we are in Walton on Thames in Surrey, and this is a special thing, which is not only is this the birthplace of Dame Judy Andrews and also famed musician Nick Lowe, but this is also in 1973 when PSYCHOMANIA was filmed. It was filmed at Shepperton Studios primarily, which is literally across the bridge from Walton. But they filmed a majority of the scenes in which the bikers terrorised the shoppers in Walton High Street, and also it's what they call Hepworth Way, and then they shot some scenes for the flats for Chopped Meat's Suicide, which is called Wellington Close. So basically we've materialised here today to try and show exactly what Walton looks like 46 years on from this movie. So are you interested in having a look at the way it looks now when it looked in the movie, Andrew?
Well, we're here now, so it's...
I can beam us back if you want.
No, it's a nice day outside. Let's give it a go. I'm actually quite interested to see.
Cool, so I hope that the two of us can enlighten you on some interesting facts that are going to go on in this video today. So hopefully you'll join us along with this. Okay, now where the cars are coming from on the right hand side is where the bikers first make their appearance in Walton Town Centre. The scene that happens before that is actually unrelated to Walton Town Centre. I have no idea where that location is, but this is where the bikers come along and begin their anarchy against all the shoppers. Here is where we roughly think that the car park used to be, but now the car park is actually now been moved into this location here. Right, so this is now the Heart, which was developed within the last 20 years, and it has a load of flats above, and also the main focal point of Walton Town Centre now is the big Sainsbury's and its multi-storey car park. So this here is an overview of Walton Town Centre. As you'll see, this is the area where the white buildings are, where it says the jewellery shop, is where the bikers emerge from, and then they go down this way here towards the town centre, which is now in this view here. And these are the flats, which I believe is called Wellington Close. Right, so as you see, we're standing on Hepworth Way, and we're outside Wellington Close, which is where biker Chopped Meat decides to kill himself and join the gang of the living dead. So, as you see, we are standing on the spot where Chopped Meat actually parks his bike. Literally just here, he parks his bike, and as you see, this road is where there's a Sainsbury's and big multi-storey car park. So it's changed a lot since back then. So we're going to try and show you some of the shots. Looking forward to that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This is roughly the spot where Chopped Meat parks his motorbike, and as he's getting off his motorcycle, he accidentally knocks a woman who is passing by with boxes in her hand. He then goes and picks them up, and she gives him a nice smile back saying thank you. And he obviously reads into that thinking that, oh, I might have a date potential here, so He's about to ask her out before he gets the cock block seal of approval from Tom and Jane standing in the far corner near these flats.
This is the flat and the close-up shot where chopped meat jumps out of the window and commits suicide. From careful examination of this shot, we have determined that he jumped out of the fifth window, the fifth floor down, which is roughly equivalent to halfway down this building. So he jumped out that window and killed himself, but not too far high up that the stuntman couldn't survive that fall. As you can see, this tower block used in Psychomania remains unchanged from the 1960s, early 70s when this movie was filmed, up to May 2019 when this is recorded. However, due to the Grenfell Tower fire disaster of a couple of years ago and the subsequent government order that all such tower blocks require replacement cladding, this actually stands as perhaps an important document, as this tower may not be in the same state in, say, a year or two from now. And here is the actual shot composition of Chop Meat's suicide jump, which looks quite a considerable distance from this angle, such is the magic of cinema. To illustrate this point about the Grenfell disaster and the subsequent government need for cladding on towers, here is an example of a Wellington Close tower block in development. The Psychomania tower block is the last one to be completed, so that stands as a case, the last remaining case of a 60s Walton On Thames architecture. And this is a very good example of what a completed tower block will look like after renovation. This, in contrast, is Walton On Thames architecture of the future. After the Psychomania chopping block tower is completed, all traces of Psychomania's impact and location work on Walton On Thames High Street will be well and truly removed from the public consciousness. So here we are on Hepworth Way, and across the road you can see Wellington Close in full view. To your right you can see the Psychomania tower block with building work having only just started as of May 2019, and to your left you can see a completed tower block which will be the finished result. Standing on Hepworth Way, we can see across the road Wellington Close in its full scope. Here you can see the tower block used in Psychomania, where chopping meat commits suicide, which is, as of May 2019, only just started completing renovation work.
So here we are, standing outside the Cecil Hepworth Playhouse here on Hepworth Way in Walton On Thames. Andrew, why are we standing here out of interest? I'm curious.
Well, it's nothing to do with Psychomania, even though Wellington Close is across the road from here. This is where an important piece of film history is.
Oh, okay.
I did a college work experience project on this Cecil Hepworth, and god damn it, I'm going to put it to good use here. This is where Hepworth Studios and Nettlefold Studios were in the early 20th century, where a wide variety of early black and white silent dog saves little boy type movies were made, and a little later than that where the Adventures of Robin Hood TV series starring Richard Green was filmed.
Wow.
It closed in 1961 and all such local film production moved to a little studio called Shepperton Studios, which is over there somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
So nothing to do with Psychomania, true, but I hope that this is a education for you and shows what, even with Psychomania, what a funny but interesting part of local film history Walton On Thames is.
So would this been where the actual studio was all along this?
Roundabout. Now today it's a playhouse for local drama and it's a dramatics production. I did a talent contest here once.
Yeah?
I was an acting student once. Can't say I've been back here since then.
But no, that's really interesting to know. So literally this closed in 61.
Yeah.
Psychomania was filmed in 73 at Shepperton, and then they filmed the
Just across the road.
Yes. So 12 years. That's quite a big difference that Shepperton makes. Obviously Shepperton's now one of the biggest film studios in the UK, along with Pinewood and what other studios have we got in England? Just those?
Off the top of my head, sorry, it'll come back to me later.
So, as you'll guess, from Walton on Thames, given that the studios is literally across the River Thames, we get a lot of Hollywood actors visiting this neighbourhood here. So, be sure if you're in Walton on Thames to have a look around and see if you spot any famous celebrities who may or may not be on their way to Shepperton Studios, or maybe just here to the local Sainsbury's to get the £3 meal deal.
You know what they call this Walton on Thames local district's Elmbridge area, right?
Okay.
The Beverly Hills of England. True story.
Brilliant. Wow. Oh. Wow, that was an adventure.
Not the word I'd use, but
Really? Are you feeling a bit nauseous from the travelling?
A bit. I might need to go somewhere private after this.
Okay. So I suppose that was Psychomania. We thought we would do something a bit different there, show you the sights of where it was filmed.
It stands as a document to. I was kind of aware of how horribly dated and falling dilapidated the 60s architecture in my local high street was at the time, but it's funny to have a record of that. So as a record of Walton on Thames in the 70s, yes, I'm glad we did that. As a movie, my opinion still stands.
It's a shame, but you should definitely check out Psychomania. It is out on a brilliant Blu-ray DVD double bill by the BFI, which they released it, would you believe?
I'm not going to start questioning the hallowed BFI's tastes.
If you were out in there in America, Arrow Video released exactly the same edition. So, I suppose that's Psychomania.
And I think I hear it now.
Yeah, it's Twister Spinner time.
Okay then.
So, without further ado, let's see what it's going to land on.
Alright.
It's landed on comedy.
Okay, so what does that give us?
It means we are reviewing the 1985 John Cleese classic Clockwise.
Okay, yeah.
Remember that one?
From when I was a child, sure. So it'd be interesting to see if my critical faculties have matured since then.
So 2 British movies on the trot then. So good. Okay.
All right, I'm not going to complain.
No. So thanks everybody for checking out today's episode. What did you think of Psychomania? Have you guys seen it? Did you know of any of the locations in the film? And be sure to message us on here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We want to hear from you. Maybe some suggestions for some movies that we should cover. So yeah, thank you very much everybody. And Andrew, any last words?
Remember everyone, if you find a random toad in a graveyard and if you try and believe really, really hard enough, you can overcome death. Apparently.
Thank you everybody. Bye-bye.